Welcome to Orthodox Family Life. Today we're back with Matushka Constantina Palmer, and today we're talking about vanity. So welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
Okay, and let's see. Can you maybe just start by explaining what vanity is?
I think that's a huge question, actually.
It is actually. I started thinking about it.
Yeah, because I think there's lots of different perspectives on vanity that we could discuss. One of the levels, I guess, that I have been thinking about is like our outward appearance, the vanity of just our looks, our concerns with our looks. But I also think that there's, even in the spiritual life, there's a level of vanity of just remaining on the surface and like being vain Christians, being shallow, being not going deeper into our spiritual life, like a superficial piety. So I think like there's a few different things we could, look at from different angles. But even though it's awkward and a little bit uncomfortable, I think it's really necessary for us to chat about the physical vanity that is so prevalent in our society, and we're so easily swayed by, to fall into, to preoccupy our time with.
Yeah.
I definitely have not been, I've been nervous about this topic because I don't want to offend people, but I do really believe it's important for us to have this conversation.
It is important, and it is easy to offend people. And we do want to probably say that like everyone's in a different place, and we're not
Absolutely.
judging anybody. Like I don't know that we can draw a line and say, this is vain and this isn't vain. Like everyone's got to,
Yeah.
figure that out for themselves. And so I'll just put a little, disclaimer now, like I've never been into wearing makeup, but I have other things that I'm vain about,
Yeah.
which I'll get into, don't worry. So, while the physical, like your typical physical, like being well made up isn't my issue, vanity is expressed for me in another way. So I'm not, I didn't get off
Exactly. There's different
with that.
manifestations of the
Yeah.
same passion. And I was the same way. Growing up, I was like just naturally more of a little bit of a hippie. So I felt like it was better to look natural,
I was also never very good at putting on makeup. So even when I tried, it looked kind of like
right.
The eyeliner was kind of, I was like, this doesn't help at all. So
Really sensitive skin. I have really sensitive skin, and so I couldn't really. My sister's amazing. For my wedding, she did my makeup. I remember I had a huge cold sore, and she's like, "Don't worry about it." I'm like, "It's going to be so obvious." She's like, "No, it's not." And even to like this day, if I look at photos, I'm like, "That's amazing." Like that was magical that she was able to do that. So yeah, full disclosure, and not to my benefit, right? So if I'm naturally predisposed to something like not wearing makeup, it doesn't. There's no value there in and of itself. You see what I mean? It's like, it's about what, where we incline to things and how we work on that.
Yeah. So why do you think women struggle with their physical appearance? We were talking about like the typical idea of vanity, why is that?
I think first off, it's important to point out that while in the history of the world, obviously, we as women incline a little bit more to adornment. I think the way that the things are set up are so much harder now. You see it all over the place. You grow up watching commercials for different products. The exposure you have to people and the way that they look is so different. I mean, maybe always in the history of the world, you'd be exposed to that a bit, but not that much. Like people didn't have the financial means to pay for a lot of adornment. So if people had expensive things or very nice things, they were reserving it for something like church, which I still actually think we should do. I think we should still have the practice of wearing our nicest clothes to church.
Sunday best.
Yes. Like I really believe that. I do. I believe that. But it's not necessary to be done up to the nines. It's more necessary, for us to, put on our best clothes, be presentable, be clean and, well-groomed kind of thing. I remember once, and I was saying to me, this is so random. I don't know why I thought of this, but I'm just going to share it anyway. She's like, tomorrow we'll take Holy Communion. So you will wash your hair. Like it was like I was wearing a headscarf. So it's not anyone, no one's seeing my hair. But that many times that has come back to me, and I thought of what a nice sentiment that, you know, tomorrow you'll wash your hair because tomorrow you're going to receive Holy Communion. You're going to be even physically the most presentable. Even my Roman Catholic grandmother, who was very pious, she literally used to wash her mouth out with soap before she took Holy Communion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that really surprised me. I didn't know that. I happened to be staying with her once and she was unwell, and she did that. And I was very surprised. And I was like, "You're washing your mouth out with soap?" And she's like, "Well, yes, I'm going to receive the gift, so I want it to be as clean as possible." It's a very beautiful sentiment. I mean, with Orthodoxy, there's, you know, we would think of it a little bit differently and maybe not so black and white.
But the intention,
you know, it's
is
like the intention, exactly. The piety that's there was really, it made an impact on me. And so I think, yeah, you know, what we have that's the most beautiful and the most good, we would wear to church. Of course, if it's appropriate, presuming that like we're dressed as appropriately as possible. And this is where things can get dicey, because I think different people have different opinions on what's appropriate and what's modest and all those things. And that's okay. I mean, we're not, who are we to come and say, let's get at the measuring tape. Okay. The skirt is this, you know, no, you know, according to the custom of your parish and and according to our own personal conscience, this is how we should dress, you know, what's considered modest and appropriate.
Yeah, because it is different in different parishes. And I think I'm so glad you brought up appropriateness, because I think that's something that is often left out of the modesty conversation. So, you know, a dress in one situation, like maybe it's mid-calf, you know, 3/4 length sleeves, you know, a slight scoop neck. It's going to be appropriate in some situations, but in other situations, it's not appropriate, you know. And so the appropriateness is really important. You can think about a bathing suit is appropriate, a modest bathing suit to go swimming in, but you're not going to wear that to church, right? So they're really, like, if you really start thinking about appropriateness, there's a lot of things that come up, right? How hot it is. Like we're in California, where in the summer it's 115 for about 2 weeks. It doesn't cool off at night. People literally faint in church at times, so the visitors that come. So we always have water bottles out, and we're just kind of standing behind the young girls waiting for them to, you know, pass out, right? So like, you know, so our rules, even though we're at a monastery, you know, no one's going to yell at you for having a shirt that's not to your wrist, right? Like we have people passing it, like there's an appropriateness there, right? Like that's different.
And in different places, it'll be different. At a men's monastery, for example, you might not have a shirt that's shorter than to the wrist.
Right.
Again, it's like you go into a different country. You know, if you visit certain countries, you're not going to dress certain ways because it's appropriate to the country. And it's the same thing when we visit monasteries. Their cultures and, you know, basically countries unto themselves. So we would respect whatever, you know, is the appropriateness of that place. That's also why, though, I said the thing about the conscience, because my conscience, like, it's important for us to follow our own consciences. So if we go to a place and certain things are appropriate because that parish has deemed it appropriate, we don't have to say anything, but we don't have to participate either.
Right.
And so if my conscience bothers me, I can dress a certain way, and I don't need to draw attention to that or try to correct other people. You know, it's about what's appropriate according to my conscience. So even if that parish has deemed something appropriate, I can still dress according to my conscience without drawing attention to it, without saying, "Hey, look at me, this is how everyone else should do it." One of the things that really helped me when we lived in Greece, you know, we lived in Thessaloniki. So it's not just in Greece, but specifically in Thessaloniki, it's much more pious and traditional than other parts of Greece. So in Thessaloniki, for example, you won't go into a church. I never went into a church that had men and women mixed. Every church I went to in Thessaloniki had women on the left and men on the right. In other parts of Greece, it wasn't this way. So in Thessaloniki, there were certain customs. You know, in Greece, it was extremely hot, like very humid. but I remember being uncomfortable wearing short sleeves, even though I think sometimes I can't remember exactly. I would try not to, because it wasn't really the custom to wear short sleeve shirts at the churches. So, again, it depends on your own level. But anyway, there are certain things we had gone away, and I had seen things in a parish that sort of surprised me, and I tried not to be scandalized. And afterwards, when we came back to Greece and we were sitting on our balcony, a friend of ours, he's now a Romanian priest monk. At the time, he was a deacon, a deacon. So he was a monk, but he was a deacon, and he was living in Thessaloniki studying. And he was a good friend of ours. He had gone to the same parish as us, and so he and Father John served together as deacons. And I was telling him about some of the things I had seen and how it had sort of bothered me. And he told me this story about a monastery in Romania that had gone to an elder about some concerns they had within the brotherhood of things that other members of the brotherhood were doing. And they were bothered by this. So they went to the elder, and I'm pretty sure it was Elder Arseny Popovich. Not Popovich, that's it starts with a P. I can't think of the... Anyway, Elder Arseny. I'm pretty sure that's who it was, but it doesn't matter who it was, really. They went to an elder, and they explained what was going on and how certain brothers, were doing certain things that they didn't agree with. And the elder told them, that's okay. You see what the situation is, but just don't you do. That was how my friend translated it. Just don't you do.
Right.
And that, I think, holds with it a whole host of things, because it's not that we aren't going to notice things that aren't really appropriate, but it's about protecting ourselves from judging other people first, and then from doing the same thing second. And so I think that's how we can have a conversation like this, and we can speak on the one hand objectively and say objectively,
right,
permanent bodily modifications, temporary bodily modifications. The fathers actually speak against that. They speak against temporary ones, because when St. John Chrysostom, when St. Basil the Great, even when St. Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain, who was much later than those fathers, when they speak about altering your appearance, there weren't permanent means to do that at that time. There's a lot of permanent ways to alter ourselves now, and to the point where it's extremely prevalent. What would have been very common when we were young is for girls to wear makeup. That's nothing compared to what's available now and what's commonplace now, from from little children having spa days where they go and get, or makeover days. Little children, not teenagers.
Right. I've heard of this. Yeah, and it sets them up for I think a life of struggle with vanity, because children at that young age in particular should be just totally oblivious to trying to look beautiful. I think I understand maybe wanting to have a nice little dress with flowers on it, but the level of being able to nitpick yourself at such a young age. My eyebrows are going this way, right? Or my hairline is here, or the color of my hair, the tech, to open a child's eyes to that at such a young age, I think is really tragic, because I do think they'll struggle with it for a long time.
Yeah, it takes anything that preoccupies us. So if from young we start to think about those things, then we're going to think about them more frequently, especially when it's I had seen a video the other day. I thought it was really good. Actually, she was saying, we were never meant to look at ourselves this frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And although mirrors have really always existed, they were always means for people to look at themselves. They would shine metal to be able to see the reflections. The reflections weren't very clear, and you didn't spend all your day looking at yourself. Otherwise, that's the whole story of Narcissus. Right?
Yeah.
Narcissus looking at himself. He's a negative story. We know this. So it just wasn't cultural for us to look at ourselves all this time and scrutinize ourselves and see videos of ourselves and so many pictures of ourselves and be able to compare us to other people, because you see standing next to them, oh, they're much skinnier than I was. I thought I was somewhat their size, but now in comparison, I see these things that just fill our thoughts with self, just self, and to what end?
Yeah, so we're getting kind of, I feel like, on the maybe on the more outside of this issue. So we have like the judgment that we could fall into, right, of other people, like you first started talking about, and now we're going into um, you just mentioned. I'm sorry, what did you just mention? The
The way we compare ourselves to others
comparison,
and become
right?
so preoccupied with our own self.
Right. So
Image.
there's certainly that too. So it's kind of like vanity is this little doorway into a whole bunch of other sins. But what is it? Like if we just go to like vanity itself, like why are we trying to look better or more? What is that?
I feel like it's misguided desire for perfection. We're going to desire perfection. We should desire perfection. We should desire improvement, being our best selves, all of these things. But it gets misdirected to the outward appearance instead of the inner man.
Yeah, that makes
Like, I
sense.
really believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that spiritually we have a natural longing to be beautiful, to be good, to be our best selves. But it gets distorted and it becomes about the way I look instead of who I actually am. And I think this is why, like, the fathers talk about Potiphar's wife and how she was adorned in all these beautiful garments, right? So externally, on the one hand, you'd say she was beautiful. She had adorned herself with all these garments. Then she goes to entice Joseph into sin. Joseph flees from her. And there's a whole hymn from Holy Week that says, although naked, he was unashamed, like the first formed man before he disobeyed. And it's because, and so the fathers actually compare her and say, Potiphar's wife was the ugly, malformed one, even though she was adorned in all of these garments. And Joseph, who was naked, and naturally we would be ashamed of our nakedness, there was no shame because he was fleeing sin. So it was really to the glory of God that his beautifulness came out because he fled sin. And that is what actually made him beautiful. But if you think of beauty as only like a surface external appearance, then you think of Potiphar's wife as beautiful and Joseph as ugly or as, like shameful. So I think really it comes back to like that desire that we innately have, and us particularly women, to be beautiful. That is a good thing. We just need to harness it and direct it toward the adornment of the inner person. And the fathers talk a lot about this. St. John Chrysostom, why do you adorn your body, giving no heed to your soul? You should bestow greater care on your soul when you keep your soul disgraceful and deformed. Do you reap anything from your outward adornments? Turn the adorning inward, and I love this line, and wrap the necklaces around your soul.
Wow. And that's St. John Chrysostom?
St. John Chrysostom.
Okay. That's
so
beautiful.
I feel like that's where, okay, we can say, yeah, I'm vain in this way and I care, but like even within the confines of modesty, there can be a whole host of, like, don't think for a second,
Absolutely.
I don't seriously color coordinate my headscarf with my outfit. Like, that's where I'm at. Do you know? Like, this is who I am.
Okay, so I want to go there in a minute, but I just want to, when you said that, I said, why is this vanity? Like, what is vanity? And it's this misdirected desire for true beauty, right? So beauty of the soul, right? So we misdirected our intentions and our desire. Well, what's interesting is then that beauty becomes grotesque. So I would say that what we now in the world call beautiful is actually grotesque. So if you're in the line at the grocery store and you see the Cosmo magazine, that's not beauty. And we talk about it like it's beauty, but it's not beauty, right? That's like, I don't even know what to call that
It's
besides.
Potiphar's wife.
It is. It just splattered everywhere, as you said, the makeup commercials. And this is one reason why I left especially my girls, but also my little boys home. I didn't usually take them grocery shopping with me because I thought every time we go through that line and every time they walk past, the 6 magazines or whatever that's there, zoop, that goes through their eyes into their brain, right? And I don't want that in their brain, right? They need a healthy image of beauty. And I was thinking about this on another show I was on when I did something on grandparents, and just thinking about what does it mean to be a beautiful grandparent. like the old granny. We never see like beautiful old women with their long gray hair and their soft wrinkles and their beautiful skin. We never see that anymore, right? We see kind of like grannies that are trying to be hot and modern. Like everything is so twisted and grotesque now. Not to be a little bit of a downer, but we just need to be aware that that is not beauty. So
Yeah. That's the thing is, and again, like this is my definition of vanity. Like I'm not quoting a patristic source. My own speculation is it is a
Sure.
misdirected desire to be beautiful. The desire to be beautiful is definitely inherently good. The definition of beautiful is where it becomes problematic.
Right.
So the Saint Nicodemus. So Saint Nicodemus talks a lot about this. When I told Father John we were gonna chat about this topic, he recommended that I read Saint Nicodemus on his book Christian Morality, and he quotes Saint John Chrysostom and Saint Basil and different saints. But he says, "Do you wish to be beautiful? Delight in the form and shape that the Creator has bestowed on you, and do not on your own add to it beautifications. For in so doing, you show yourself to be more perfect and wiser than God, and thereby somehow to correct his imperfect creation."
Wow.
So there's that too. There's like just being grateful to God for how we look. And he says in another spot, he says, on the day of judgment, God will say to you, "I do not know who you are. I did not paint you with makeup. No, I created you in my image and likeness."
And it is beautiful when you see, young people who are just healthy. I think that could be thrown in there too, like taking care of yourself. This isn't about not ever, as you mentioned, like bathe yourself. Like you should be clean, you should be neat, you should be healthy, all these things. But there's a real beauty to that, just a simple beauty when you see young people that are within those bounds, right?
And older people too.
Older
Older
people,
people
yeah.
who like take care of themselves and just try to live healthy life and are comfortable with themselves. It's very noticeable when you're with someone who values those things, because they'll make comments about them. They'll make disparaging comments about themselves because they place value in those physical attributes that they feel they don't possess. So when you see an older person though who's comfortable with who they are, who is like, well, this is it. My face is wrinkled because I lived a life of whatever, cares or attempting not to have cares, and my attempts to not have cares have given me worry wrinkles, whatever the case may be. It's really beautiful to see that, and encouraging and inspiring. And I think that's something I know for me, the example that people's appearance have is actually very beneficial to me. There's so just to give an idea of what I mean by this, just to back it up, I guess I should say, to give a little bit, I'll start here. There's this story that I read recently, like just a few months ago. It was published on the website Pravoslavie, which is called Orthodox Christian in English. They publish fantastic articles. And in this story, it talked about a Russian priest who would sometimes wear his raso, which is the usually black, long cassock that a priest wears. Or if you ever go to a church, the chanter might be wearing one when you're in the church.
You're talking about an outer cassock that's looser?
No, we call that the exo raso.
Okay.
Well, I'm just talking about the regular raso, just the most basic one that they wear that would look long. It's a long garment. Okay. Some people, if they were to comment on it who don't know, they would say like, "Oh, that's a dress," or that's, so it's a long garment. Raso cassock. It gets, the Latin word is cassock, but raso is what we a lot of times use from the Greek. And this priest would sometimes wear it and he sometimes wouldn't wear it when he was out in public. He happened to be wearing it one evening when he went to the pharmacy. Standing behind him was a young girl who had decided to commit suicide. So she had come to the pharmacy to buy certain drugs in order to end her life. And when she stood behind the priest and she saw his raso and she looked at his cassock, she thought to herself, maybe this isn't something I should do. Because when she saw his raso, she begins to reflect on God, you know, on the after, on what's going to happen to her, these sorts of things. So she actually chose not to take her own life. A while goes by and she comes to church and she explains to the priest, like, you don't know who I am, but I have seen you before. And when I saw you and I saw that you were dressed as a priest, it inspired me not to kill myself. And the priest said, this is why after this experience, I try to always wear my raso. And this, I think, is like huge to show like our actual, what we choose to adorn ourselves with impacts those around us, positively and negatively. We all know the negative influences because they're more prevalent and we see them.
Yeah.
But there's also
a beautiful story, by the way.
It's an extremely beautiful story. And when we were in Greece, so in the Greek Typicon, every Friday night you do like the salutations of the Theotokos during Great Lent. You do a portion of Heraclitus hymn and a canon. And we were at our church, our local church in Thessaloniki, and a monk by the name of Father Daniel, who's from the Danielite Brotherhood in Katonachia on the Holy Mountain. He was called the Nightingale because his chanting is so beautiful that they said he sounded like a nightingale. He was there that evening. So this particular evening, full disclosure, I had been thinking about, debating whether or not I should chop my hair off really short. And that night at the Akathis, there was a woman had come to the church, and in the Greek church, most women didn't wear headscarves, right? So I would wear a headscarf, but most didn't, so I could see their hair. So the woman comes in and she has the exact hairstyle I wanted. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'm cutting my hair off. I'm going to have this hairstyle. So after the service was over, I was waiting in the back for Father John. He was a deacon at the time, so he was divesting in the altar. And then I saw, there was a group of people waiting. They were going to see the father when he came by, the monk. So I was waiting anyway. And our friend came with the monk to kind of bring him, like kind of escort him. So he stopped at us, Father John and I, and he said, here are these kids. They're from America. Greeks always said that we were from America. I'd say, well, we're from Canada, but I get it. America, it's fine. And the monk started to talk to us. And he started to say, but he had gone to America. He had visited. He was giving some different impressions that he had, some parishes he had been to. And he said to Father John, your raso is a confession of faith. And even though people will, they'll sort of mock you for it, they'll make fun of you for it, still it's a confession of faith. And so it's good for you to wear it. And he turned to me and he said, and you with your long hair, don't you know that St. Paul says that a woman's hair is her glory? And I just started laughing like a lunatic. I'm sure people were like, because I literally had just been like, that's it, I'm cutting my hair off. So anyway, that statement though, about Father John wearing his raso and being a confession of faith, we have witnessed this ourselves. Here on the island, it's very, he looks very foreign, and he's gotten all sorts of comments that haven't been flattering by wearing his raso around town. But one time we went hiking, and because he wears his raso, whatever he does, mowing the lawn, shoveling the snow, he wears his raso. We went hiking, he's wearing his raso. So as we were walking up the mountain, we had gotten to a certain point in the trail, and we decided to turn back and go back the way that the trail is. There's like a parking lot with a beach. So we were going back. And on our way back, we encountered this man. And he started to speak to us in Russian. So we explained that we don't speak Russian. And he switched into English and he said, "Are you an Orthodox priest?" And Father John said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, where are you from?" And Father John said, "Well, I'm from New Brunswick, but I live here. I'm a priest here." And we had lived in St. John's by that point for 3 years. And the man says, "For 20 years, I have lived on this island, and I never knew that there was a mission here." He didn't know about it when it was when they were just doing reader services, and he didn't know about it when we had moved to the island. So he says, "Where's the mission? What are the service times?" So we explained it to him, and he says, "Okay, I'll see you tomorrow." And we said, "Sure," and kind of thought, Probably not, because many times we had met, different people who said, oh, I'm Orthodox, but they never really would show up at the church. So the next day he did come to church, and he has come every single service ever after. So what I didn't know at the time, which I found out later, was he had seen Father John's Rasso. He had seen Father John from afar. He had gone to the beach or whatever, but he had seen Father John going up the side of the mountain, and he thought, that looks like an Orthodox priest. I need to go and see if this is an actual Orthodox priest, because he had kept his Orthodox faith. He would read Orthodox books. He would go to, Orthodox churches when he left the island. So he followed us up into the hills. I never knew this until after. And it was from seeing Father John's Rasso that he learned that there was a church here. And he was able to finally, he said to us, actually, he had recently been praying for God to help him so that he could start going to an Orthodox church. And he was able to see Father John in the Rasso, and that's how he found out about the church. So, don't ever think that our appearance doesn't have an effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like your own little His Eminence the Novice story. You're out in the middle of nowhere, and God just, brings two people together, one who is publicly confessing their faith, and the other who has been searching. Think about that, 20 years. That's
20
like
years.
that's a long time to hope and pray for something on the island that was there, A little sidebar, a similar thing happened with me that, really I became Orthodox because a kid in my high school said a prayer before he ate his food. I went to an art high school, it was very liberal. We were all artists, dancers. It's like, fame, like from the 80s. And he could do that in that environment. And everyone still not just liked the kid, but like respected him, like in a genuine way, because he was such a kind, like he was a real Christian kid. And, I've told my story elsewhere, but basically when I went looking for the church, I called him up and he said, well, I just found this thing called the Orthodox Church and it's amazing. You should go. So it's like I look back on that small or not so small, public confession. We're not doing it to show off to people, right? We're just doing it because that's what we should do. But it is a confession of faith to the people around you, and it can change people's lives, and you may never know.
Exactly. And that's why we shouldn't shy away from expressing our faith, from living our life according to our conscience. Embrace that. If your conscience is telling you to stop wearing makeup, stop wearing makeup. It's going to be a struggle.
Now, this might seem like an obvious question, but why should people follow their conscience? Instead of just listening to somebody on the internet saying you shouldn't wear makeup and everyone should stop wearing makeup, right? Why is it important to listen to your conscience?
I personally think it's because people are different places. And I think sometimes it depends on the circumstance. So, like, I once met a woman who was converting to Orthodoxy, and she was advised not to stop wearing makeup and not to stop dyeing her hair and not to start dressing, frumpy, so as not to put a stumbling block in the way of her husband becoming Orthodox. So maybe that's radical to some people. I don't know. But if that's what a holy elder told me, then that's what I would do. So
I've heard similar advice to a woman: don't wear it to the monastery, but if your husband likes it,
Yeah. So that's a decision between a couple. That's a decision between a person and their spiritual father. There's certain things that we talked about before. Certain things need to stop immediately, like certain big sins. But there's other things that we're in a different place. And some things are more difficult for others than, like I said, like we said, neither one of us ever really wore makeup much. So
it's not hard for us.
Yeah, it's for someone else to decide what's best for them, but that's why I think it's especially important to follow our conscience. And even if things can feel awkward and feel, we feel out of place, ultimately, like, to be perfectly frank, this is what the church teaches. The church teaches that we should dress certain ways and we should, leave off from painting our faces, which of course would include from having medical procedures done to our faces or to our bodies, having, other, maybe it's like the Father said, God will say to you, I didn't paint you with makeup. He might say, I didn't paint you with ink. That's for God to decide. That's each according to their conscience within what the decision is between them, the conversation between them and their spiritual father, them and their spouse, whatever the case may be. But we can always go deeper in our spiritual life. Always. Yeah. There's never going to be, we're never going to exhaust it. So we can take little baby steps if that's what's necessary. But for some people, it won't be that. It'll be tomorrow I'm going to decide to have the filler removed from my lips. And I'm not going to do that anymore. And that's for someone else to decide. The main thing, though, I really feel like the main thing is for us to start to say, for me to spend my time and my attention on the adornment of my soul. Ultimately, like, it has to go deeper. It can't just be, I dress modestly. I wear a headscarf when I go to church. I don't wear pants unless I'm wearing a tunic or a dress over them. That can be good in and of itself, sure. But if it doesn't go deeper than that, again, like, it's not about the external trappings. It's about the hidden man of the heart. So St. Peter says, right? Let it not be the outward adorning, the plaiting of hair, the wearing of golds, but let it be the hidden man of the heart. He says, in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God, is of great price. These things are going to come with us. The necklaces, as St. John Chrysostom says, that we put around our soul, they're coming with us into paradise. The lip filler and whatever else we have done to ourselves, the hair dye, that's not coming with us. And might even have been a trapping for us. I don't know. Like, that's up to, again, each according to their own conscience. We have to examine that ourselves. But we know for sure, all of us, though, are called to adorn our soul. We're not far from, a few weeks from now, we're going to sing that amazing hymn during Holy Week. Behold, the bridegroom comes. And that's going to continue. We're going to hear it again and again. The first 3 nights of Holy Week, the bridegroom services, we're going to hear it again and again. Have you adorned your garment, or are you naked? And so this is actually what we're seeking. And if it means me putting on a face of makeup and making sure my hair is dyed and my nails are done and I have the, most well-fitting clothes and all these things, if that becomes a trapping for me and I have been neglected to put on the garment of grace, I will be left out of the kingdom. It's the exact opposite of what we want. Like, if we stop and really think about it, what is keeping me from the kingdom? For one person, it will be those things. For someone else, it'll be something else. But the vanity is that remaining on this level, I just appear outwardly as a Christian. There's another hymn in Holy Week. I'm sorry, but I listen to Holy Week hymns a lot.
They're my favorite. They're so good.
We're starting already. It was like the week before Great Lent. We're starting already. But there's a hymn that I often really, like, it pricks me. And it's about Judas. It's Holy Thursday. It's one of the Apostica hymns. I'll try to think if I can remember. It's like, though in appearance he was a disciple, in reality he was there as a murderer. So it says, kissing he sold. These outward signs of piety he used for evil means. And I have to ask myself, and I want you to ask yourself, in appearance, are we disciples? In reality, what are we?
Right.
In appearance, we might be disciples, but in reality, so this is sort of like where I feel like the meat and potatoes are of a conversation like this is, so, okay, so what? Okay, so I am vain. Okay, so I do care too much about my outward appearance. Okay, these things do preoccupy me. Okay, I do spend too much time on this or that, or worrying too much about my appearance. It might not be that I, spend all my time adorning myself, but I spend all my time thinking about how I look. Does this dress make me look fat? Does, all of those things that can be equally trappings, equally about vanity. But if we spend our time and attention looking inward and really seeking to beautify our inner man, our soul, like that, it's okay to have that that intensity, as long as it's in this direction, the inside. And yeah, I know we talked before about Bishop Nonas.
Yes.
So he, there was a woman who was a harlot. I mean, she dressed like a harlot. At least they assumed she was, based on her outward appearance. And he would say he would see her and he would have a lot of compassion. He had said to his fellow bishops, she does better than we do, because she spends all of this time adorning herself to attract the love and attention of a man. Do we fathers do the same to attract the grace of God? Do we spend that much time and attention to adorn our soul so that the grace of God comes to us the way she does her outward appearance to attract the attention of a man? And the fathers, rather than condemn her, they were really moved by that. And they took more seriously self-reflection and took more seriously that idea that if a harlot can spend all that time and attention, what am I doing? Eventually, Bishop Nona speaks with this woman. She becomes repentant, and now we know her as Saint Pelagia, who we celebrate on October 8th.
What is her name? Say it again.
The Greek is Pelagia, but probably Pelagia would be how it gets pronounced in English.
I wasn't sure if it's Pelagia or
P-I-A, Pelagia.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up that story and the Judas story, because that's exactly where I wanted to go. That I think sometimes, especially maybe if you're in a little more conservative leaning parish or community, it can sometimes feel like a little bit of a who's going to be more modest or more, like, okay, you have long sleeves, but is everything navy or blue or dark or subdued? Like,
oh yes,
I don't know, right? Like,
oh yeah, we can judge to the day is done. Like, we can find ways to categorize what's pious, what's modest.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
how to tie your headscarf or just endless stuff. So I think that for me, part of it is that I think about what I want people to think about me. Like, what I want you to think I'm pious. So I'm going to look this way, right? That's a real struggle, right? So maybe I want you to not think of me as outwardly beautiful, but inwardly beautiful. Don't you think,
Yes, exactly.
I think it's still vanity, right? Maybe that's vainglory as well. I'm not sure. Maybe it's both, but
yeah, I think that takes it a step up. I actually think it's probably more destructive.
Yeah, it's worse. So it doesn't matter. I don't wear makeup if I still have that even worse, hidden vanity or hidden vainglory about what I want people to think of me.
Yeah. And the delusion of thinking I'm pious when my outward appearance is literally to have people think I'm pious.
Yeah.
So it's not for Christ.
Yeah, when you say it out loud, you see how ridiculous it sounds. Like, right? You should say these things out loud a little more often. Like, that's really dumb.
That was the benefits of public confession in the early church. The shame was great.
Yeah.
But it's true. Like, we really need to think about that. Like, now, during these days of Great Lent, especially, there's a lot of ways that we can look outwardly pious. It needs to be about, it's like, it's not this or that. It's not outwardly pious or inwardly pious. No, it's this and that. It's outwardly pious and inwardly pious. So it's why Christ says, when you fast, wash your face. Don't go around looking gaunt. His whole point is, it's not for the glory of man. It's for the glory of God. It's for the sanctification of the soul and the adornment of the soul.
And don't be extreme too in the way that, I think it's like, don't broaden, or maybe he's talking to the Pharisees at some point where they broaden their robes, right? And I think, we can do that too, maybe with our demeanor of looking very sorrowful. And, we all have, prayer robes, but, how long is it? How is it dragging behind us? Like, we can be a little showy with these things if we're not careful, right?
Absolutely.
And we should be careful about that.
We should absolutely be careful about that, because at the end of the day, I can stand in the church with my long prayer robe, and if the whole time my mind isn't on Christ, it is 100% not a worthy sacrifice. My prayer will not be accepted by God, no matter how many 300 prayer robes I've gone through. It's literally not accepted. It's repugnant.
Yeah,
Like
we go
those
back
really,
to it's worse. It's
yeah,
worse. Like this is the publican and the Pharisee, you know.
yeah. So again, it's like it's about the inner, it's about
Mhm.
the adornment of the inner man. This was something that was so obvious to me because I spent time with Orthodox nuns who don't wear makeup,
Mhm.
who, you know, who on the one hand, when you first meet them, might come across as being like not beautiful. And then the more you get to know them, the
Yeah.
more beautiful they become. And you can't see them anymore with your carnal eyes.
Mhm.
You don't see the goatee that the nun has or like the dark,
True.
circles. You see the person and you think
Mhm.
of the person as beautiful.
Mhm.
This is why the saints were beautiful, because they had been transformed by the grace of God. It's not just like, oh, they happen to be physically attractive. No, these people were transformed and that made them beautiful. Like it manifested as a
Right.
physical beauty because it was so starkly spiritual. The light that comes off of someone's face, that's holy.
Yeah, it's a true beauty too, as you mentioned. I think we might have talked about this on another episode, but you could look at the abbesses, the older abbesses, like the abbess of our monastery or Eldris Macrina, right? If you think of them in worldly terms, they're just old women, right? Wrinkly, like they're not beautiful according to worldly standards. But anyone who's been around them, who knows them, knows that they kind of radiate with, a divine beauty. Like you would never think of them as being ugly when you're in their presence. And that kind of leads me to something else I ran across a few months ago. It was there were a bunch of videos on, these aren't Orthodox videos, but just how to be a classy woman or how to be a, you know,
Demure, a
y-
demure woman.
I think that's the new word, right?
Yeah.
But these were more like I think she was like maybe an older Eastern European lady, and she was talking about basically it kind of disintegrated into how to look expensive and classy, but it was all exterior things. Women sit this way, or you have this kind of a handbag, and it was so external. There was nothing truly noble about it. And I love that St. Paisios always talks about that nobility of spirit. That's one of my favorite things he talks about, right? And the older Greek ladies I know that have that, they just shine with an inner beauty that you can't fake. You can't watch a video on YouTube about how to sit and how to walk and get that. That's not what this is about.
Not at
So,
all. No, it's about acquiring the grace of God that transforms you internally and externally. You do
mhm,
it, but if you're the kind of person who's becoming transformed, you don't care what your external is. You
right.
could be like, I could be burned with acid and I will be okay with it because my goal is to have my soul transformed. And I know that this skin, it's going to die, it's going to corrupt, and it's going to dissolve in the earth, and worms are going to eat this skin. But the
Mhm.
only worm that can eat my soul is the never, what does Christ call it? He mentioned something like
The
the worm that doesn't die, or whatever exactly the phrase is, that if our soul is sent to Hades,
mm,
our soul will be eaten by that. We want to protect our soul from that. Our body, we're Christians, we believe body and soul were persons, and we aren't going to, we're not those early, there was like heresies in the early church, not Manichaeanism. There was another one that starts with an M, but where they like denigrated the body. No, we are not going
mhm,
to denigrate our body. We're not going to purposefully deform ourselves. We are body and soul, but our primary occupation is the beauty and the everlasting beauty of our soul. We will take care of our body. We will try to eat healthy, and we will be mindful of, exercising and these things that will maintain our body.
mhm,
To maintain our soul, though. And
right.
like, some McCranie talks about this, right? Just as you feed your body food so that it has calories to burn to be able to continue, so we have to feed our soul with prayer. It needs calories. It needs spiritual calories. So again, it's about the inner person and what things prevent me from going deeper into my spiritual life. And the truth is, like, there's a never ending, an exhaustive list of things that distract us. We want to try to avoid those as much as possible. and looking at, the next procedure I can have done, because now I'm starting to see signs of whatever wrinkle. Not only is like the thing itself not like, it's not worth your time to have that procedure done, but you're also going to spend so much time looking into all of it and scrutinize. I'm going to look in the mirror and I'm going to scrutinize where exactly I need to fix this or that thing, which at the end of the day, we will not slow the aging process. It's going to happen to us. We will not slow death. It's going to happen to us. We are okay with death. It's not death that we fear. It's separation from Christ eternally, eternal separation from Christ, the death of the soul. So that's why we want to be so mindful of where I fall into vanity, and where I fall into vanity, just like envy, is going to be different from where someone else falls into into vanity. It's particular to us. So we need to do the work to look at ourselves, to determine within ourselves, not someone else's, what they dictate to us. It's not whether or not someone else thinks we should only wear navy or black to be modest in the church. No, like, it's what I personally, in consultation with my spiritual father, and consultation with my spouse if need be, or just according to my conscience, and again, it's not like we just want to leave it at that. Like, well, my conscience says that I can be head to toe covered in this or that thing, and all sorts of body modifications. The church doesn't teach that that's the most appropriate. So we want to.
Yeah, we're kind of talking about a conscience that is dialed in, right? Like, that is a healthy conscience, right? That's one way that the Lord speaks to us and said, "Hey, you need to be working on this," right? It's through our conscience. That's what it's for. But if you've ignored your conscience for so long, it might not be reliable, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of assuming that you have a healthy conscience when you're saying this of your conscience.
Yeah, we do want to challenge ourselves. Like, a part of these conversations are for us to challenge ourselves, to try to see ourselves maybe in a little bit of a different light. Maybe we haven't had the opportunity to have conversations like this, or to think like this, or to hear St. Nicodemus tell us how important it is to, adorn our soul and not our body, to beautify the hidden, the inner man with with spiritual gifts, that those things we're going to wear when we enter the kingdom. Like, all of that, all of the virtue that we acquire through the grace of God, that will literally be our adornment in the kingdom of heaven. That's what we will be adorned by, the grace of God. And it will be to the degree with which we have struggled to acquire that grace now while living in this life. It's not a religion. Like, our orthodoxy isn't a religion. Orthodoxy is a revelation of God. This was something we had read years ago in Elder Athanasius Mytilenaeus, who is a Greek elder. He wrote a series, like, for years and years, he did a series of homilies on the book of the Revelation.
Yeah. So these are from Zoe Press. You can get them at Zoe Press. Our friend runs that. Yeah.
They're wonderful. And he specifically says, our faith isn't it isn't a religion, it's a kingdom. And we loved it so much. My brother and I used to make these jokes that we would say, like, "Oh, I can't do that. That's against my kingdom." The way people would say, it's against my religion. It's a kingdom. Like, this is what we're trying to acquire, and not just after we die. It isn't a kingdom after we die. Christ says the kingdom of God is within you. So if it's within me, then I better make sure that I'm well dressed on the inside. I don't want to be wearing the bathing suit, my soul wearing a bathing suit in the kingdom of God within me.
Yeah. Yeah. You keep going exactly where I want to take our conversation. So I want to go back a little bit to death, because I was going to bring that up right when you did. So, because I do think that some of the things that a lot of women are chasing after, right, with getting rid of the wrinkles or dyeing your hair or lifts and tucks or whatever, is about looking younger, right? There's like a huge drive and a pressure, I'd even say, right, to look younger. Maybe if you're working in an office or something, that's something that I have heard women have been maybe chastised is a little too strong of a word, but like, encouraged, like, hey, you need to look better for this job. So, but under that is, I think, a real fear of death, right? And or maybe a running from the reality of death. We don't want to think about it, right? And I remember in my own life, this was about 6 months maybe, or it was within a year of my conversion to Orthodoxy. I don't think I've shared this on the channel, but my 5-year-old nephew died tragically. And this was in February. And so this was kind of the first Lent that I was fully in the church. I had been baptized on Palm Sunday. And there was nothing like that Pascha that I experienced that year, because death was so palpable that everything else fell away. I stopped smoking. I was a smoker since, a young teen. I won't say how young. Everything just fell away. Like things that I had struggled with for so long in the face of death, like I don't need that anymore. Like I'm just shedding these things, right? Because death wakes us up in a way that nothing else does. So this is why the fathers always say you need to remember your own death, right? That you will die. We will each get our turn. And when you keep that in mind, it's a lot easier to make some good decisions in your life, to put things in the proper order. Because I love the story you told. I think it was last time with, I think it was the little sewing bobbin that somebody had in paradise with them, right? And it was all about the intention, right? Like we were talking about, do you work so hard and it all ends up in the ditch, like the vision Father Melchizedek had. But I think that goes for the same thing with what we're talking about here. What is the intention of your life? Like, are you putting it all inwardly, right? Are you trying to do everything you can to be with Christ, right? So it's not about looking pious, but are you actually trying to live a pious life, right? That's the difference, right? And those things that you do with the good intentions and with seeking Christ, those will be with you in paradise, right?
And God knows our struggles. So he knows for someone who struggles with that particular difficult element of the passion of vanity, he's gonna, like, that's gonna be a greater reward.
Yeah.
Standing next to someone who just never was into it, that doesn't, okay, by nature, not to be into it, okay, fine. But the value is actually in fighting back against our passions and showing God our disposition to actually not be this or that way, to not be conquered by this or that passion, to not be enslaved by this or that thing that totally preoccupies us and consumes us, but to actually thwart that with the grace of God and to show, like, I'm here, Lord, to battle this passion. I seek your assistance. I need your assistance, but I'm here in the fight. Help me. That person will get so much more grace because of that. And especially when it's like comes from your own self. That's the thing with Christianity. It's not an external force towards us. The thing that I noticed the most when we visited Turkey, we'd gone to Constantinople. Yeah. And I remember it being so distinct is we were sitting at a cafe and it was time for the Muslim prayers. So the mosques in the minarets, all of them had these people out on the minaret shouting these prayers or through like a microphone, a megaphone. And I just remember it striking me so much as like it being this thing external and being pressed onto the people. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Christianity, with Orthodoxy, you go into this church and it like encompasses you, like you're in it, you're a part of it. It's not an external force. It is an internal, the kingdom of God is within you. That means that it's up to us. It's up to me to acquire the kingdom. It's not up to the bishops. It's not up to the priests. It's not up to these external people around me. It's up to me. And if I only do it for the bishops and for the priests and for the external people around me, then God doesn't see value in that offering. It's the exact opposite of religion, because what we've said is Christianity is not a religion. It is a revelation. It is a kingdom. But with religion, it's all about show me the tick boxes. Tick box, you dress this way, tick box. Right. It's not about the inner man at all. It's not about the thoughts. It's not about the secret hidden sins, right? It's why the Jews, the Pharisees especially, the Jews didn't like what Christ would say when he would say, he who looks on a woman with lust has sinned with her. He's committed adultery. They didn't like that. Why? Because we're all filled with adulterous thoughts. It's very natural for us to be filled with adulterous thoughts. And once Christ says, you're guilty of that, well, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear that we're guilty of what we do in the inner chamber of our heart. So being that Christianity is all about the inner life, the inner spiritual life, the onus is on us, but the reward is better because of it too. Christ will reward. Like, yes, there is a measure where we do it because we have to do it. Fine. There's a within that, bandwidth of that, there's a reward for that. But the greater reward will be that we did it solely for the love of Christ, solely to give up my passion, solely to deny myself the thing that keeps me, that's a barrier between me and Christ.
And I think, isn't this why that we have some fathers, like I think of St. Porphyrius and others, who talk so much about love, and it's almost like the love of God is drawing them to himself, right? Instead of like pushing from behind, here you have to do all these things. It's like they're just so drawn to God because of his love. And so their love for them also. And my husband always says, and I forget who he heard this from, but there is no compulsion in Orthodoxy. Like everything is an invitation.
Exactly.
That's so powerful to understand.
Yeah. Absolutely. He recently, one of our catechumens said to me, "Are children obligated to fast in the Orthodox Church?" And I said, "No one is obligated to do anything." It's a big difference between the West, the way the West thinks, and the way other religions think. So 100%, no one's compelled to do anything. It's all about the free will of the person. And that's, like you said about St. Porphyrius, and like this joy. That's why St. Porphyrius could go to a house. He was a priest in Athens, and he would go do house blessings. Like in Greece, it's common. The priest would just go around and like knock on doors and enter homes. It's not like here, like, oh, let me make an arrangement with you. When can you stop by? And he had shown up at this house and knocked on the door, and a madame answered. And the madame said, "Oh, Father, no, this is a house, of ill repute," let's say. In other words, it was where the young girls who were in the sex trade lived. And the woman, who was basically, when we say madame, it's like a female pimp. And unfortunately, I've known a few of them in my work as a social worker. She said, "No, the girls are not worthy, or they're unclean." That's what she said. "They're unclean. But I will kiss the cross, and then you can, go on. But the girls can't come, because the priest would come with the cross, and you'd bless, and you would kiss the cross." And he said, "No, all of the girls, I want them all to come out and kiss the cross." He sees the inner person.
Right.
Someone else looks at it and says, "Oh no, we can't let the girls kiss the cross because they live a sinful life." Are they living a sinful life? Objectively, yes, they're living a sinful life, because Orthodoxy is about the inner man. Then we don't condemn people necessarily. Like, we allow God to do the condemning. We can do the observing, and we can do the, I'm just not going to do, right? I see something that's not good for people to fall into. I'm going to abstain from judging. I'm going to say, I'm just not going to do this. I'm not going to be, I'm not going to live my life that way. But that's why someone like St. Porphyrius can say, "No, I want the girls to come out and kiss the cross." It's a faith of mercy. It's a faith of the inner man. So we never know the person on the street corner who looks like a sex worker, how close she is to being a Saint Pelagia, being a Saint Thesia, to being a Saint Paisia, like all these saints that lived that life. So we can make big assumptions about someone's outward appearance, both for the good and for the bad. Big assumptions. Oh, she's so pious because she drags behind her a 1,000 knot prayer rope. And maybe she is so pious, and maybe she isn't. And so we should actually reserve.
It's not even our business. I don't know why we even go there. Like, it has nothing to do with us.
Exactly. But that's why we should actually reserve judgment on both sides.
On both sides, absolutely.
Don't judge people. Like, we just absolutely should not be making assumptions. Maybe they are really pious. Maybe they aren't. Maybe this person is really secular. Maybe they're not. Like, to not judge doesn't mean don't judge people who live sinfully. No. Don't judge anybody. Don't assign to anyone your opinion and your way of thinking. Like, I assign to you that you are a saint. I assign to you that you are the pinnacle of piety. And then what happens? The moment they do something wrong, we're so offended and so distraught. I thought they were a saint. How could she speak that way to me? No, you thought she was a saint because you accepted a thought that told you she was a saint, instead of saying she's what she is. And I'm okay with her being who she is. And it doesn't affect me personally. I need to be who I'm supposed to be. And that's what affects me.
Yeah. I'm my business. My business ends like right here with me and maybe with my children, if you're a mom, right? But my business isn't like everybody else and where they're at. It's just not. And it's so easy to get caught up in that.
Very easy, and to be fooled on both sides, to think,
Yeah.
to overly think that someone is this or that because of how many books they wrote or whatever the case may be. They can quote the fathers a lot. She
Yeah.
must be really pious. Yeah.
There's a lot of very
and see
there's a lot of very hidden pious people in the parishes that you would never
exactly.
look at
Exactly.
and think they were pious, but they're there.
Yeah. And that's why we don't want to have a superficial piety.
Mhm.
We want to be the person who's genuinely pious. We don't want to be a Judas who, while in appearance was a disciple, but in reality was a murderer. We want to be the pious person, the true person. And this is something, because I just am so happening to read Elder Athanasios Mytilineos these days. Just today I happened to, because I had the day off because we celebrate St. Patrick here in
That's so
Newfoundland.
great.
We have the day off for St. Patrick, and at my work, we have the day off for St. George, and we have the day off for St. John the Baptist, because the city of St. John's was found by the Europeans. It was discovered by the Europeans on his feast day. They've changed it. They don't call it St. John's feast anymore. They call it, but originally the city was found by the Europeans. Did the city exist before that? Yes. Did people live here? Absolutely. Europeans found it on the feast of St. John the Baptist, so they named it St. John's. So anyway, I was happening to read the book today, and he said this really great thing that I hadn't thought of when I was thinking about our chat about vanity. I was more thinking about like external trappings, but I read this and I was like, oh my goodness, that's vanity. That's superficial piety. So I jotted it down. And so this is what the elder says. This condition, superficial piety, according to St. Paul, is a sign of the last times. He writes, but know this, that in the last days, perilous times will come, for people will be lovers of himself, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, wholly unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control. And he goes on to say a few things, and I don't think I wrote it down correctly. Lovers of pleasure, not, rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. So that's from Timothy. And then Elder Athanasius continues, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. Thereof, they will take the shape, they will have the form, and they'll pretend externally. The outward form will be godly. They will make the sign of the cross. They will dress modestly. They will attend church, but they will have denied the power of godliness. I repeat, the Apostle Paul includes this as one of the signs of the last times. We don't want to have a form of piety and deny its power, a form of godliness and deny its power. We want to be the people who, with the grace of God, can tell people, get up, arise. You've died, get up, arise, with so much faith that actually occurs. Like, can you imagine? Get up and arise and live again. That's what, was it Saint of Lucia, another woman who lived a life as what we would say in modern society, a sex worker. She heard a monk who was in the next room over at an inn or something like that, speaking about the eternal life and what's prepared for those who live an adulterous lifestyle. She became very fearful for her soul. She asked him to tell her about the kingdom of God and what would happen to her and how she should lead her life. And he told her, leave off from this sinful lifestyle. And if you're able, go and become an ascetic, go and live in the wilderness. So she actually becomes an abbess. She has a sisterhood. She would raise people from the dead. And not only that, she once was going to be tortured. And during her torture, a person came by to tell her torturer that his wife had died. And the torturer said, oh, Evdokia, please pray for my wife that she would, but she would be held, that she wouldn't die. She said she prayed for his wife. The wife came back to life. He became a Christian. The wife became a Christian. And then the next time someone else had something happen where their son died during like a hunting accident, the man who had been torturing her was there. And he said, Evdokia can help you. Go to her because she can raise people from the dead. And you know what Evdokia said? I think his name was Diogenes. She says, no, Theogenes, you raise him from the dead. And he's like, you want me to raise him from the dead? She said, yes, you go and you say the words, you pray and raise him from the dead. So he goes, the one who had tortured the saint, and he raised the guy from the dead. That's what we want to be.
Yeah. There's so many miracles in the life of the church, kind of around normal people. And I think that book, Ascetics in the World, I think I mentioned it last time. I think it touches on some of those things where I remember one story about a little Greek lady who was, this is like people from maybe 100 years ago, like recent lay people who are living ascetically in the world in Greece. And she was illiterate. She couldn't read or write Greek, but she really wanted to read the Gospels. She really wanted to be able to read the Scriptures. So she prayed. Her children were like, well, why don't you take a class and, we can teach you or whatever. She just prayed and God enlightened her to be able to read the Scriptures, but she couldn't read anything else. She couldn't read a newspaper. It was like he only gave grace to read the Gospels, And I just thought those things happen all the time. Like if you just talk with the older people or, people who are living a spiritual life, you'll really see these little manifestations of God's power, like you're saying, in our lives that should be happening.
Absolutely. You will have a monk come and tell you, oh, with your long hair, don't you know that St. Paul says a woman's hair is glorious?
Or this is, you were for crying, or,
Yeah,
no, this
exactly.
is St. Barbara, right? You could just keep going. You could keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. So for us, like if we haven't, like if anyone watching hasn't had the opportunities that I had because I lived in a place like Greece, because I was able to, while doing my master's degree, go out and take another master's degree with the sisters at their monasteries, don't feel discouraged. Like look in your own life. God will show you those things within your own life. They're there. They're absolutely there.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't always look at them and don't, we don't think of them as big deals. They are big deals. Anytime God moves in our life through whatever means, they are big deals. They are God reminding us that he's present with us, that he's right there alongside us. He's waiting for us to get up when we fall. He's seeking for us to say, today, Lord, I want you to give me the courage to fight this passion. Today I will start. And it could be anything. And that's up to our own conscience to determine, where we need to fight our own spiritual battles. Story, actually, if I can share a story about a friend of mine who talked about her own battle. And it touches on, for us, I think probably to a little like the judgment, my propensity to pass judgment on people based on their physical appearance, both good and bad ways. So this story is from the Sweetness of Grace, and it's called Skin Deep Judgments. Her long, stylish dyed hair, perfectly manicured nails, long eyelashes, and skillfully applied makeup surprised me the first few times I saw her in church. She was pious, attentive, and prayerful. These latter qualities made me perplexed as to why she seemed to try so hard to make her outward appearance beautiful when her inner person shone with beauty. The more I got to know her, the more perplexed I became. In other words, I judged her. I thought, how are you so pious? To be like, this story is embarrassing. Like, I'll be honest, like even thinking about relaying this story is embarrassing to me because it shows this is who my inner man is, a judgmental, petty person. So she impressed me so much with her depth of knowledge and enthusiasm for the faith. But still, that nagging question wouldn't be silenced. Why? Why, if she is so spiritual, would she spend so much time on her appearance? These are the thoughts, the honest, if cruel thoughts of a judgmental person, which we've talked about before, that destructive word, why.
Yeah.
Driving back home from the baptism of a mutual friend's baby, we were story swapping, telling each other various details of our lives and journeys in the Orthodox faith. This is something I'll just stop and say, for a lot of people who grew up Orthodox, they don't have this divide of like convert cradle. They think of a convert as a person who, whether they were baptized as a baby or not, at some point chose to take their faith seriously. So in Greece, I never actually learned the Greek word for convert. I still don't know what that Greek word is. I would say I was baptized, people would just talk about this. I changed, my life changed. This is when I started to be of the church, is a term that we would mostly hear, tis ecclesias, of the church. So me personally, I don't ascribe to be a convert. I don't call myself a convert. If people say, were you Orthodox or whatever, I'll say, yes, I was baptized, when I was 23 or whatever the case may be. But I never actually apply that title to myself, because I believe that there really is no distinction, cradle or convert. We're just Orthodox Christians.
Yeah.
So that was just a little parentheses. So she tells this story. She was on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and the group that she was with had visited St. Sava's Monastery in Palestine. This monastery, like Mount Athos, is closed to women visitors. While the men in the group went into the monastery compound, the women were escorted to an area where they were offered water and a sweet. She told me that day she was wearing no makeup except on her eyes, but she was wearing large sunglasses so that her makeup wouldn't be noticeable. Despite this, a monk from St. Sava's approached her, and with pain in his voice, he said, "My child, why do you paint your face? Don't you know it's a sin to obstruct the image of God?" Hearing the monk's words, she was surprised and speechless. He continued, "I will pray for you not to paint your face." This simple conversation had a great and lasting impact on her. Finishing her story, she looked at me in the rearview mirror. I was sitting in the back seat, and she said, "Constantina, will you pray for me to stop wearing makeup?" Now it was my turn to be surprised. Yep, exactly. That was my turn to be surprised, and I quickly answered yes. She repeated herself, "Will you pray for me to stop wearing makeup?" And again, I said yes. What a lesson I learned that day. Who am I ever to ask that dreadful, damaging 3-letter question, why? Who am I to look on someone and form any kind of judgment about their appearance, any kind of judgment about their internal state? Her struggle is her struggle. We each have our own. Having her look me straight in the eyes and appeal for me to pray for her to cut and appeal for me to pray for her cut me to the quick. I had rashly judged her, and there she was asking for my prayers. I hope through her prayers, I will struggle against that judgmental and condemning involuntary question that arises in my heart when I see something or someone I don't understand. We never know what someone's through and where they are on their spiritual journey. We make judgments based on what we see, but they are only skin-deep judgments. If only we knew people's hearts, their struggles, we would pray instead of entertaining the judgmental whys that come to us, that come to me most of all. And here I say Abba Dorotheus, who we chatted about a couple videos ago. Abba Dorotheus says, "Should we not tremble hearing what happened to the great father who, when he heard that a certain brother had committed fornication, he said, 'Oh, he did badly.' Do you not know what a terrible thing is said about him in the sayings of the fathers? It is said that the holy angel brought the soul of the sinner to him and said, 'Look, this is the person that you have judged. He is dead now. Where do you command that he should be put? In the kingdom or in hell?' What could be more terrible than this burden?" So at the end of the day, we have to go back to that just don't you do. We can see things around us that we don't agree with, that we think are destructive, that grieve us. But the most important thing for us is for us to abstain from judging and passing judgment and criticizing others for those things, and then for us not to do them ourselves. But when we criticize and judge and pass judgment, 100%, suddenly we're going to find ourselves looking up the nearest clinic for us to get lip filler. Because what happens is when we judge people, we fall into the same sins we are judging people for.
Yeah.
Bad
Absolutely.
things happen when we judge people.
And I just want to comment on your friend's humility, because I think a lot of people would, this is why like humility is like the queen of the virtues, because it just cuts through all of the garbage, and just changes people instantly, right? Like if you weren't changed by that little story, God help you, because that's so powerful to see somebody who,
Have that humility.
my feeling would be like, well, like I would want to like push back or like, why are you judging me? Like, have like some
Yes.
combative thoughts about it, right? But for someone to just say, I can't stop, pray for me, like in utter humility and in transparency, that is so beautiful and so powerful.
Yeah.
And it reminded me a story. I want to say it's St. John Chrysostom, but I'm not sure. I can't remember. But one of the fathers tells a story to somebody who is judging others. And he says, there were two slaves, two young girls in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Do you know this? Maybe you know who. You want to tell it?
Abadorothius tells
Oh,
this.
is that who it is? Okay.
Yeah.
So one is bought by a pious young lady and is trained how to be a maid and is trained in all the virtues, and they live together piously. And the other twin is sent off or the other young girl is sent off, is bought by the circus, and she's, taught acrobatics. And of course, this is a very, like
Provocative.
provocative, sinful life. Yeah. Lifestyle, right? So is God going to judge them the same on the day of judgment?
Yeah.
Right? They started off the same, and yet they were, because of no fault of their own, right? They were put on two different paths.
Yeah.
And we just don't know. We don't know where people are coming from. We don't know where they're headed. It's not our business. It's not our business to say why. And we get in so much trouble when we do,
Yeah.
But that humility just cuts through everything.
Yeah. And for us to, again, just like the inward looking, if we're inward looking and we're worried about whether or not we've adorned the soul of our soul, whether or not our heart is, there's a phrase where they say maggoty. I can't think of it. I don't know. Maggoty. It just means like dirty. I literally, the first time a client said this to me, he's like, the house is maggoty. And I was like, I don't see the maggots. I don't understand.
Well, it's an English word. I thought it was a Greek word.
Yeah, no, in Newfoundland, they have very particular manner of speech. It's very Irish. And a lot of their phrases. And anyway, so I was thinking, is my heart maggoty? Sorry, that's where that came from. Is my heart maggoty? Is my heart dirty? Is my heart unclean? So Abadorothius again says that one of the best mechanisms to keep ourselves from this judging is when we see someone committing a sin, to say, today he's sinning, today she's sinning, tomorrow it'll be me. She for sure will repent. Will I repent? And then it allows us to, like, maybe before we can even stop it, we've noticed the person's sin. But then it puts up that barrier immediately of repentance and humility. Tomorrow I will fall into the same sin, except that person will repent. So now we have the good thought about the person. They're for sure going to repent, but I don't know if I'm going to repent. The humility.
Yeah.
So we can, I had a friend I remember years ago with two little girls, and she said to me, like, how do I keep them from basically telling them, like, no, we don't do those things. We don't dress that way. We don't, use those kinds of cosmetics, and yet they see it all around them. And I was like, it's a hard one. You have to basically just say, like, we just don't do, like, it's just not what we do.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I will out one of my children with a little story. That's okay. It wasn't about vanity. Well, maybe it was. I'm not sure. You can tell me at the end. But we're having a little picnic, and this child of mine was maybe 8. Okay. And so we're at the park, sorry. And another little girl who's like 3 or 4 is with her granny, and they're having a picnic. And the little girl hooks on to my child and invites them over for the picnic. So, I'm like, that's fine. I can see everything going on. So she sits on the blanket with the little girl. And the little girl opens up a bag of chips, potato chips, right? And she says, I'm surprised your mom lets you eat those. You, come here. Had to give her the talk. Don't comment on what these people are eating. That is not your business, okay? Okay. Like, it's not our business what these people are eating. Okay, go back. Next thing, I'll never forget this. Next thing, little girl pulls out a soda out of her bag, and my kid looks at me like, are we really not going to say anything about this? No, this is not your business. But her face of like horror, like, why are you letting this 3-year-old, drink soda? Like, you're going to have those conversations, but I just always go back to not our business, not our circus, not our monkeys,
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And we don't know, I mean, the soda, that's just hilarious, but we don't know where someone is. Like, I can honestly tell you from my own experience, I mean, this blew me away. I will never forget this person. In my whole career as a social worker, this is a standout. I had gone to the women's shelter because I was like the liaison social worker with the women's shelter. And I met with this young woman who could barely walk, who was missing a lot of teeth, who was almost missing all of her hair, and was in an extreme state of liver failure. So we started chatting, and she told me a little bit about her story, that she was addicted to alcohol and that she was living with a man who was also addicted to alcohol. And in order to get money to feed their addiction, she would sell herself. So, I've heard all sorts of stories as a social worker, and you really learn to steel yourself and to be present with the person and be like empathetic, but to not like bring your own self into it so much. This was the hardest time I ever had as a social worker, not full on breaking down crying, when she looked at me and she said, I just want to get back to a place where I can receive Holy Communion. Again, not Orthodox.
Wow.
She was a Catholic girl. She felt great shame for the life that she had chosen. She was clearly dying from liver failure. And for her to sit across from me and say, I just want to get back to a place where I can receive Holy Communion, which means that that's how she was reflecting on her own soul, but she didn't feel prepared. She didn't feel clean enough yet. And that humility and that repentance, I was about to break down and cry. And by the grace of God, I was waiting for a fax. For some odd reason, my office was sending me something to the shelter. And a staff person walked in at that moment and was able to gave me the paperwork so I could kind of compose myself instead of breaking down in front of this person.
Yeah.
I will never forget her. You look at her externally and you say, here's a person who just came from the hospital. She's in the last, has extreme liver failure because of what she's done to herself from her alcohol addiction. She sold her body and all these things. That moment, if she and I were to die at the same time, like if we go before God at the same time, like whose soul is in a better state in that moment? Certainly wasn't mine. So we never know where people are. We have to restrain ourselves from judging. We can look at something and say, that is wrong, that is damaging, that is destructive. But I just won't do. And for sure, this person, they might be living that way today, but they're going to repent. I don't know if I will. We have to keep things in perspective.
And I feel so much compassion for people whose sinful life is, or struggles even, is kind of manifest on the outside, where it can't be hidden. Because so many of us maybe have hidden sin. Well, we all have hidden sins and hidden struggles, right? But like, I know a man who's, was into like, heroin. He's all tattooed. He looks, he's got one leg. It looks like there's actually kind of a famous story about him. I'll share maybe another time. But his daughter is a close friend of mine, and or like my mom, who was mentally ill, where you could, you just look at her and you knew, like people would kind of back away or look, there was a barrier there because it was written all over her. Big, huge problem. I have problems, and I think that's like such a cross to bear for these people, really,
But it's also the way that they can be much more humble and much more repentant than we can, because we hide behind the mask of piety. We have a form of godliness, but we deny its power. So in a way, it's the people who are the most destitute that they can be the most amazing people. Like it's the addict who knows that they're fallen, who knows that without the reliance on God, they will never remain sober. They will never remain clean. Whereas we sit, or I at least sit in my nice little house with my nice little job, with my good relationship with my husband, And I don't necessarily ever reflect on that. I don't have the humility to be in the place that they are. But an addict, time and time again, I've seen this with addicts. They have an authenticity to themselves, because St. Pisces talks a little bit about this, being reconciled to your sin. And what he means by that isn't you don't accept your sin, you don't embrace it, but you acknowledge that that's where you are and that's who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And when a person who struggles with addictions is working towards maintaining that clean, sober life, that's ever present in their life. They keep that as a present, that's their reminder. There go I, but the grace of God, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Right? My dad, he absolutely wouldn't mind me sharing that he was an alcoholic, and he was sober for 38 years by the time he died. He attended meetings. He openly declared himself an alcoholic. He felt like this was, a defining feature of his behaviors was being an alcoholic. And he would say those things, but by the grace of God, there go I.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's like, not only should we not pass judgment about people, we have ample opportunities to actually think better about people than maybe their external circumstances manifest.
Absolutely.
Too. We can actually think of someone as a saint because of the difficulties they've gone through, because of their attempts to change their life, to transform themselves. That's a big deal. For someone to be addicted to a substance
Mm-hmm.
and to fight that, to get up, to say, I will keep falling if God, you don't help me not to fall. That's a big deal. We want that same intensity and that ever remembrance of God needing to help us for us to overcome things. We want that in our daily life too. Those should be reminders for us when we stand before our icons, when we make our cross before we eat, to like really be mindful of, Lord, if you don't come, I will fall into sin. And the hidden sins are much more destructive.
Yeah.
So we need to think about, adorning our souls with those necklaces, wrapping them around the soul, fighting our passions, having humility, not judging other people, condemning ourselves when we do judge other people. That's a really good mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
You judge someone, you immediately condemn yourself, you cry out to God, he'll come and he'll save you. You condemn someone, you judge someone, you don't immediately condemn yourself, you are falling into that sin or something worse.
Yeah.
It's going to be like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so obvious. It's markedly obvious that it's cause and effect.
Yeah.
If you are
it's a spiritual law, right?
Exactly. Like literally right now we could reflect on ourselves. If we are going through a really difficult temptation and we're having attacks, spiritual attacks with specific things, if we were to be honest and trace our steps back, it's very likely that it'll have originated because we judged someone.
Mm-hmm.
That's confirmation. Maybe not, but most of the time, if we trace it back, it's because we judged someone.
Yeah. We often criticize people for the things that we do.
Yes.
Like, they're this and that. It's like, oh, wait, that could be applied to me. Like very clearly, like the top of my list of what I should be working on. That's what I notice in other people.
Yeah. And that's how we can read like the canons of the church that say men shouldn't even trim their beard. Like the canons say this, like they shouldn't even, modify themselves. We can know those things and still not condemn people for it. And just, again, it be like the intensity be about ourselves and not about other people. About 10 years ago, I had been invited to speak at a conference in New Mexico, and His Eminence Yerasim was there, who he wasn't at the time a bishop, he was Father Yerasim.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so he also was speaking at this conference, and my dad happened to be with me actually. I had flown from Newfoundland, he had flown down from New Brunswick. We were attending the talk, and at the end there was like a question and answer period, and someone asked, a young fella in the crowd asked, Father, how come some priests have beards and some don't? And the answer that Father Yerasim gave was, oh, that's easy. All men have beards, some shave them. I mean, we laughed.
Great answer.
The crowd laughed and laughed. And it was like, it cut through the silliness of a judgmental question like that. Oh, that's easy. All priests have beards, some shave them. Like, you can see things that you don't like, that you don't agree with, whatever the case may be, and abstain from judging and focus on ourselves. And that, to me, that answer was like the best thing that he could say, instead of being like, whoa, we shouldn't judge. And no, he made a joke out of it, and it's burned into our memories. I'm sure anyone who was at that remembers that line that Father Yedesim said.
Yeah. And that is different than, as you said, being aware of what the church teaches and the canons. That's separate, like our own personal judgment of people and where they're at. That's where we get to the not my circus, not my monkeys, which is a sticker I now have on my laptop to remind myself, like, not my business.
Yeah. There's all sorts of things we can remind ourselves of. And if we do find that, we do struggle with specific things, write down a good quote like that, put it in a prominent place that we're going to remember.
It's not the most spiritual quote, but
but it's helpful.
It helps.
Whatever's going to keep us in the fight and give us the courage to not fall into those things, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can summarize our little tips.
Yes, I was going to ask you to. You're reading my mind today. Okay.
So the first thing is for us to focus on adorning the inner man, right? There's another quote I can share, St. Nicodemus, about adorning. A Christian should beautify the inner man and not the outer. He should adorn the soul and not the body, not the perishable and temporary adornments, not with perishable and temporary adornments, but with imperishable and eternal ones, not with bodily and earthly beautifications, but with spiritual and heavenly ones. That is to say, with the precious garments of love, of purity, of gentleness, of humility, and of the other virtues, with the divine charism. It says, I don't know how we say that in English. Charism. Charism of the Holy Spirit, and the upright morals beyond censure that are proper to the estate of Christians, for Christians are the sons and daughters of the heavenly King. Again, remember, we don't have a religion. Christianity is a revelation. And so it's a kingdom.
A kingdom,
So we adorn the inner man so that within our souls, we have the proper adornments to be worthy of entrance into the kingdom of heaven. So our second tip, I guess we could say, is that both the positive and negative effects our appearance had. Think of that priest who, because he wore his raso that night to go to the pharmacy, he prevented a girl from dying by suicide. When I read that, I was so taken aback, because I thought that priest would have gone to the judgment and God would have been like, this night when you chose not to dress as a priest, when you chose to just go incognito into the world, that's the night that, had you worn your raso that I gave you, I bestowed upon you the grace of the priesthood. I clothed you in the grace of the priesthood. And this is an outward manifestation of that grace of the priesthood. If you hadn't worn it, that girl would have killed herself. Imagine if he had gone to the judgment and God said she would have been prevented. She would have been prevented, but you wanted to hide the grace of the priesthood that was cloaking you, or whatever the case may have been with that particular priest. But still,
if that one guy hadn't said his prayer when he was eating his lunch, in my high school. Yeah,
exactly. If Father John hadn't worn his raso when we were out hiking, maybe the man that saw us didn't know enough that there's something here and I can research it online. He obviously thought there was nothing here. We didn't have a building. So it wasn't like there was any other external obvious sign that there was a church here. So adorn our inner man, be mindful of what our external appearance does for others, both the positive and the negative effects, and avoid passing judgment on others. People are at different places. And for all we know, they're in a much more spiritual place than we are. My friend was in a much better spiritual place than I am. So we can't judge by externals. We don't know. And both the good and the bad. Neither assume someone's pious nor impious. We should treat everyone equally and think everyone, if we're going to pass judgment, it's just everyone's better than me. And without the grace of God, I would be miserable and I'd be so much horrible and worse than I already am.
Yeah, that's the only person we're allowed to judge, ourselves. You can do that all you want.
Exactly. And when we do that, Christ comes and is like, okay, I'm going to be your cheerleader now. I'm going to help you overcome these things that you see about yourself.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we went way over, but it's always so much of a joy to speak with you about these things. So, what is our next topic?
Patience, I believe.
Patience, yeah. So it's patient. And yeah, thanks for being here, and we'll see you all next time.
Yeah, through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, O Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen.
Sus animas Thou,